like usual, we'll just read through the changelog and demo some of the things that actually are discussed in here. So can you read this, or should I make this maybe a little bit larger? Let's see if I can make this larger. Yeah. Good. OK. All right. So first change I want to show is in a 3D viewer. Since you're probably aware of the fact that you have some sections in FAFB where you have these giant shifts. And if you want to view those, a neuron like that in a 3D viewer looks like that, which isn't really pleasant. And there has been a script floating around that I built a few months back, which is now integrated in the 3D viewer to correct for this. So it's now much easier to do. If you want to get rid of this, you can now go to skeleton filters. Oh, it's super blurry, but I guess you get the idea where to find that. OK. And you have these two new checkboxes in the input box saying to interpolate locations. And what this does is if a neuron is on such a location, which can either be a broken section or all broken sections or particular sections in the stack you're looking at, it will sort of correct or interpolate the locations of the nodes in the sections to the respective child and parent node, or the first child if there are more than one. So I already set this to section 2636, which seems to be a good example of this. So let me close that maybe. So 2636 looks like that. Oh, you can already see there are some shifts, and this is a neuron that crosses this section. That's why I put in the section 2636 here. And if I now click this, it will remove this dent, which makes it maybe nicer for visualizations.
Can you put multiple sections?
Yeah, you can put a comma separate list in there. So at least it should. Let's try. If it explodes, then oh, can you actually hear me?
Yeah.
OK, good. So let's see, 2640 maybe. Yeah, OK. I think it does it, but do you happen to know another section that's broken? But it should, anyhow. It should work.
If you export it, does it export the interpolated version or the old version?
Yeah, it should export the, it exports the interpolated version. So, and both animations as well as, images. Speaking of animations, you can now cancel animations that you see go wrong right from the beginning. If you have long-running animation export, this is annoying, or was annoying in the past. So if you export an animation and do this, you now can actually cancel it, which, if it's long-running, might be helpful. OK. Next, review widgets. There were a few changes in there. One is that you now can make reviews go not only upstream, meaning towards the root node, but you can reverse this so that you can review from the root downstream in particular segments still. So if I have this demo neuron here, let me close that again. So normally you would go just that way towards the root. But if you now reset the review, my reviews, if you now uncheck upstream review, it will do the reverse. It will start at the root in this particular segment, and you have to use Q to move forward, so the keys are not reversed. They stay consistent. Q moves downstream, W upstream. So with Q, you move now to the end. And also, next point here is that this green done message is now only shown, or 100% of reviews only considered to be true if if 100% is reached in the column that is checked. So if there are multiple people reviewing a particular segment, you can select which ones you would consider as, say, trustworthy to some extent, right? So if you can, if you have multiple people or your team, are you aware of review teams? If not, I briefly show it maybe. Still, you can have a persistent set of people you trust for review. If you open the settings widget with the gear icon up there, and there's somewhere down here, review team, and I just like put in Corey here as an example. So Corey trace is probably good. So if he reviews something, that's probably okay. And if he would have reviewed something in here, there would be a team column also. And if this is checked by default, and and the same applies there. If it is checked and 100% is reached in this particular column, it will count as reviewed. And this is also taken into consideration when using Shift, Q, and W, which you can use to jump over already reviewed nodes. Because currently, one comment that reached me this morning, which is a change in this release, unintentional, but still changed, is that if nodes are reviewed, you can't actually walk through them anymore with Q or W. Before this was possible, right? So if you had a segment reviewed and maybe one node wasn't reviewed in it, you could still step through it from the beginning until you reach that node, maybe mark it reviewed and continue. But apparently as a side effect of making this downstream review possible, I accidentally removed this functionality that you can actually now step through an already reviewed neuron to re-review. But I will add this again since this seems useful to have in general. But if you only want to reach an unreviewed node, you can always just use Shift, Q, or W to actually get to that unreviewed node. Okay. Maybe not so relevant for most of you, but I say nonetheless, there is now the possibility to import skeletons in CATMAID. There has been the ability to do that for quite a while. And this has all sorts of problems in terms of making sure that the nodes that you pull in from another project or another CATMAID instance would match up with what you got in terms of image data, but also in terms of synapses and other things. But if you're only interested in importing the morphology of a neuron, the skeleton, so to speak, you can do this through user interface now, but only people who have the can import permission, which has to be given to you by admin, are allowed to do this. But if you have this permission, you can now go in the export-import widget, and you will see another tab in here. So I don't have this permission in FAFB, but if it was there, there is a new tab which would allow you to import SWC files. Also, the disk icon, which was up here before, which was used to export SWC files, which is essentially a CSV file for a skeleton. This has been removed or moved over here into the export widget. So you would now here export the SWC or not. Yeah, well, why ever it's not working right now. But anyhow, that's the idea. I got to look into that. OK. So beforehand, the import was only accessible through the API. I don't know if you ever used that, but this also now requires this particular import permission to actually do that. I only say this because Ruchi asked me to import some, or trying importing some neurons from the main FAFB instance to the training instance to maybe get a better example of a current or particular neuron that now has been reconstructed. And this makes use cases like this easier. OK. Then in the Neuron Navigator, I replaced the column. Before there was a last used column here, also here. And while this is still sort of a last use state, if you don't have any constraints on an annotation, like in the general annotations list, this is the last use date of particular annotations, you have, oops. So, if you have a constraint, like a particular skeleton that you're looking at, or a particular neuron, you have this annotated on column actually refers to the original date this annotation was used on a neuron, and not the last used date anymore, which was in the past prone to change, at least. It was possible to change this date through merges and splits, which also now changed in behavior slightly. Okay, next also. So when splitting well, let me just read what I actually wrote there. Oh yeah, okay, the first point here, to not skip that, is that, like I said last time, when merging neurons, you have always a winning and a losing neuron, right? One keeps the ID and everything that's attached to it, and the other neuron is deleted and is merged into the other neuron. So far, the default behavior was that the winning neuron is the one that has the most nodes. This, after a brief discussion last time, changed now into the default is the winning, the winning default neuron is the one with the longest cable length, which seems more appropriate. So also, after some more discussion about this, the annotation dates associated, or the time associated with annotating a particular neuron during a merge is now kept. So when we split a skeleton in the past, it was the case that the split off part, so the new skeleton, would also get the annotations that you select, right? So if you, oh, by the way, I changed these icons up here a little bit. Yeah, so I guess you're aware of that. If you check annotations in here, they will be copied over to the split off part. In the past, the behavior was that the time point of the splitting operation was the time point of annotation of the new split off neuron also, which is technically correct, I guess, to some extent at least, since at least technically we are creating a new neuron and annotating it on the back end, but this is not what you want typically, since there has been a reason at some point to annotate this neuron with this annotation, and now if you split this, the time is preserved. So the original date and time when this annotation was linked to this neuron stays the same. Similar behavior change has been implemented for merging neurons. Before, it was the case that if annotations are shared between both parts that are merged, the time of the winning skeleton's annotation will be kept. So if you merge a small fragment into a large neuron, both have the same annotation and have been annotated in different points in time with that annotation. This was in the past like that the annotation time of the large, say, winning part of this merge was kept, but now it's the older state, which seems more reasonable actually, since at some point back in the time, someone already had this idea to label a particular fragment that is now merged into a bigger part with a particular annotation. So this time can also be preserved now, or is preserved now. Okay. Yeah, one thing that I already got some comments about, excuse me, is that the status bar is empty down here. And this was a change made purposefully to reduce latency that people tracing overseas or somewhere else, not here, have, so that not another request from the browser to the server here at Janelia has to be done only for activating a node. You can still get this information, though, if you want to see it by pressing I, and that's the usual line you will see that you're used to. But I agree that this would be nice to be configurable, and so I'll push a change where this is an option that you can select this by default, to have this enabled by default, so that you have the old behavior back, because here it doesn't really matter if there's another request, it's fast. But for people in Cambridge, it can actually matter, and if they are not interested, especially maybe during review or so, if you're quickly browsing through skeletons, to actually see this, and this can actually make a difference. What else? Okay, that's more like a bug fix. Measurement table now also shows the active skeleton in green, if it's selected. Another annotation-related change is this one, that you can now define a set of personal tags that you tend to use often, or that you want to use often, and you can use this set of tags by pressing Alt-T. You can configure this set by, again, through the settings widget, and somewhere hidden down here, you have this new input field personal tag set. So if I say Tom demo Janelia, and would now switch on tags here. So there's no tag anywhere, but if I use Alt-T, it will use this personal tag set right away, and Alt-Shift-T will move it again. So if you, for instance, quickly want to do some to-dos that are linked to your name, you could have a list of your name and the to-do tag in this personal tag set, and quickly then different neurons nodes annotated with this.
Yeah, I noticed with the personal tags that when you add it to a node that already has tags on it, it removes all the old nodes.
Oh, that's certainly not intended. Let me write this down. That shouldn't be the case. Okay, I said this already, that you can, in principle at least, for some reason it wasn't working, export SWC files for neurons, and not only for one, but for multiple as well. So you can generate a zip file if you want to export multiple skeletons. Also, one small change, it's now possible to have aliases for widgets. So in this top bar here, many of these widgets have this little window-like icon. And if you click it, it basically opens a little input box saying, allowing you to put in an alias, and it will show up in the title bar. And you can close it again or change it. If it's removed, it will move the parentheses as well. With many widgets open, this can become handy to actually get an idea what widget does what. Another small change is that, sorry for switching so quickly, is that you can now have more fine-grained colors or color differences for review. In the past, we always only had green, orange, and red, essentially, for review. But sometimes it's useful to know whether a neuron is 90% reviewed also, and not have it appear as orange, like 10% reviewed neuron. So what you can do now is that you can say down here in this settings widget also use detailed review color status. And if you, let me maybe select some random neuron. Oh, still the old one selected. Okay. Okay, I guess that's a bad example. Let's stick to the one ahead here. So, okay, so now as I move through this, the color gets brighter and brighter until it hits green, right? And so this is sometimes helpful. And I think this setting is persisted. If not, it should be. So it's down here, detailed review color. Let's see actually if it remembers that I selected this. And if not, I'll make sure that, yeah, okay. Let me write this down. Okay. Yeah, for now you have to activate it again after reloading CATMAID. And this is respected in all widgets that show review status. So that's the same. In the selection table, you also have this column for reviews, right? And it also uses this coloring scheme. Let's see, what else? Not so relevant here, but mention it nonetheless. CATMAID supports so-called stack groups. If you have multiple stacks, maybe with a high-res image over a low-res large stack, you can use these stack groups to like bind these together to some extent and have the front end, the browser window be clever about it to load them all at the same time with different colors, and or you have like orthogonal views where you can have different perspectives on the same image stack. And these are all managed through these so-called stack groups. Before, it wasn't possible to actually reference them in the URL that's generated here, which is now the case. You can do this now. But like I said, you probably don't use that. Also, might be handy to browse an image stack. You know, if you, let me actually first read what's actually happening here. So, you know, with comma and dot, you can move one section up and down. And with shift, comma, and dot, you can move 10 sections up and down. And it's now possible to adjust this larger jump, this shift behavior, or the distance you would actually jump on the fly. So if you press shift hash, like, oh, well, where is it? Like this, and say, let's jump 100 sections, you would now be able to like make large jump through the section. If you think this is was too large, you can like again adjust it on the fly and say, okay, then it's only 20 sections, and there you go. And you can, but if you don't want to use the UI for this, there is also an input field here in the settings widget. Yeah. What else? Right, the connector table now. Let's see if we have a connector somewhere. Not really. And most of these neurons are unconnected. Okay, if I say open a connector table, I can barely read it. So like that. With control space, you can bring up this dialog. Oh. But you still need to be able to write. So, okay, just to explain what this bullet point is about, you have now for individual connector links between a connector and a skeleton, each row in this table refers to one of these links, not a whole connector, but this relation between a node and a connector. You have the date when it was created and when it was last modified. Modification, for instance, happens if you give it different confidence. Right, with the numbers 1 to 5, you can apply confidence values to nodes or to edges actually between nodes, or at least that's how it is visualized. And the same is true for this connection between connectors and the node. And this would cause a change in the modification date, but obviously not in the creation date. Both seem to be useful, so both are visible there. Also, more relevant to people tracing not here in Janelia is that moving through a skeleton with the brackets, where you can, the closing bracket is going to a child node, and the opening bracket is going to the parent node, right? So if you do this before, there was always an extra request made to the server to actually figure out what the children are of a particular node to move to the next children or cycle through the children if there are many. So this is not the case anymore. So with the bracket keys, you can move as you know, as you did before, but it should be quicker, a little bit quicker at least if you're tracing remotely, since the server doesn't have to be asked anymore. This information is already on the client. Okay, so much for feature changes. Small bug fixes. 3D viewer used to show the active green node sphere all the time, essentially. Even if there was no active node, this is now gone. Also not relevant here, really, since you don't have multiple image data layers that I mentioned in the stack groups. But if you do this, or if you have that, tracing will now always stay on top, like individual nodes. And also some mirror technicality that before it could happen if a mirror is not reachable. You probably know if you click on this lower left white blue box icon, you open the layer properties for your current stack viewer, which has the image data here and neuron tracing data. And image data can have these mirrors, right? And if I say, let's check the internet, but I don't have access actually to the internet from this laptop, it will automatically switch to the next one. But what happened until this release was that the tracing was gone then. Or it wasn't gone, it was just hidden, and you had to click the tool button again. But now this is now happening automatically, and nodes are not hidden anymore. I think there are some API changes for people that use the API, but I guess if you do use the API, you would read the changelog anyhow, and so I don't need to talk about that. Okay, I think that concludes the update in terms of features and fixes. Comments, suggestions, back reports?
You know how in the other version you got it so that the tag thing would stay on?
Yeah.
Can you do that so you don't have to have the bounding box and for on as well?
Yeah, makes perfect sense. Yeah, I guess in the end, many widgets would actually benefit from some setting persistency, but especially in the 3D viewer, yeah, I'll make a note and see I can prioritize this state saving a little bit. At least for the 3D viewer, it should be relatively simple to get this done. Just a second.